What is going on, ladies and gents? Chris Albert here with the Warrior Soul podcast, and I've got a really special week of programming for you. We've got two guests here who served as Marine Corps Raiders, and we're going to do these interviews back to back. And I'm calling it Marine Raider Week. Number one, I did not serve in Marine Special Operations. I was in Marine Corps Infantry. Definitely wasn't Special Operations at the time, but these guys were, and they're absolutely outstanding individuals. The first one is Mr. Josh Honsberger, and you might not have heard of him before, but he works with Nick Kumalatzos, who's got a huge channel here on YouTube in putting together those Marine Corps boot camp prep programs and Marine Raider prep programs. And Josh had a great career in the Marine Raiders himself, and we're doing a two-part interview. So in this first part, we're going to be talking about how Josh got into the Raiders. And then in our second part, we're going to talk a little bit more about Josh's career, and we're going to talk about an injury that he sustained while he was going through training at a point in his career, and it was a catastrophic injury. So really insane story, really great story as to how he got into the Raiders, and just really informative. And this guy's a great dude. He served on the same team as the other guest we're bringing on this week. We've already mentioned him, Nick Kumalatzos, who's coming on to the show. This is the second episode that we're doing with Nick Kumalatzos. And in that episode, we're going to be talking about testosterone and hormone replacement therapy and the things you need to think about if you are going to get into hormone replacement therapy. So really great series of content coming up for you guys. This first episode is awesome. It's going to talk about how Josh got into the Raiders, things you should think about if you are considering joining the Marine Corps and joining Marine Corps Special Operations. Then the next episode is going to be more about Josh's career, his deployments, and then the episode after that is going to be with Nick. And I'm releasing the second Josh episode tomorrow and the episode with Nick the day after. So stay tuned, guys. Now with that, let's get into the interview. Josh Honsberger, welcome to the show, man.
What up? Thanks for having me.
So I've been following you a bit, looking at some of the stuff you and Nick Kumalatzos have been doing. I've been checking you out. You're real close to where I am. You're out in Marietta, right?
Yeah. Yep. I think you're just, I don't know, maybe an hour up the road or something like that.
Nice. Yeah, the Inland Empire, California. A lot of people but don't understand the Inland Empire. They think everything's like LA, San Francisco, and San Diego, right?
This is definitely not beach country, palm trees, or sandy beaches, man. This is like high desert mountains and totally different, yeah.
Pickup trucks, Americans, that kind of stuff.
It's definitely different, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I like it out here.
So real quick for our audience, you served as a Marine Raider. Just want to give a quick background on you, where you came from, how you ended up joining, and what life's been like.
How far back do you want to go?
What made you join the Marine Corps?
Naiveness and aggression. Honestly, I always had some weird infatuation with the military in general. I really don't maybe know what it was in particular. My grandpa, he served in the Army back in Korean War days. He was a tanker. And I had a friend. I guess I had a friend at the time when I was going through high school. So it was like, junior year, we were kind of figuring out, like, am I going to college, or am I going this, or am I doing this? And college was definitely not something that was on the books for me. It just wasn't my bag, man. Like I wasn't terrible at school. I wasn't great at school. It's just, I didn't find that drawing of interest of anything just yet that was like, I want to go do this and I have to do this. And military was something I wanted to do. And it was Army, for a while for my grandpa. I think that was kind of like, trying to follow in footsteps and pay some loyalty. And then I had a friend, pretty close friend, that her grandpa was in the Korean War. And I just started talking to him a little bit, and I really didn't know any difference between, Army, Marine Corps, like Navy. I knew there were different branches and stuff like that, but I wasn't, you know, I had no loyalties at that point yet. And I started talking with him, and didn't really say much, you know, but he had like 3 or 4 Purple Hearts, which was, you know, now looking back on it, I understand it, which is kind of crazy. Sorry, man, I need to plug this in.
It's all good, man. It's all good.
These magnets, I'll fall off the computer. So, you know, yeah, he had like 3 or 4 Purple Hearts, and I was talking to him one day, just real loosely, nothing crazy, and he had this picture that hung above the mantle, and I asked him about it one day, you know, because it was kind of like this crinkled up thing. It had a crease in it, and it wasn't perfect, but it was hung above the mantle like it was this pristine, you know, expensive piece of artwork. And come to find out, he was doing door-to-door like clearing, and he had cut it out. It was one of the things he had cut out, you know, of someone's house. It was like a war trophy, and somehow in there it kind of clicked. I was like, shit, that sounds pretty cool. You know, that's a cool story. And from there, I just was like, all right, I'm going into the Marine Corps. And that drove me. I signed paperwork when I was like 17, you know. My mom signed my rights away when I was 17, you know. Yeah.
My mom chased me with the broomstick and tried to break my leg.
She was definitely not, you know, really stoked that I was going to do it, but I think she understood that it was something I wanted to do, and I was driven to it. And, you know, we talked about it quite a bit. You know, it wasn't like one day I just went down there and signed paperwork away from her. You know, we kind of talked. And I think she was just more or less trying to assist me in getting or doing what I wanted. And, you know, this was, what would this been? This would have been October of 2000. So nothing had happened yet. You know what I mean? Like, you know, pre-war days, you know, so.
Yeah. I went in 1999, and it was just a different world. Clinton years, right?
Yeah. And it was like, yeah, we train and we go do this and we go do that, but there's really not like there wasn't a direct thing that, you know, anybody was really tying anything to at that point. At least in history, you know, that we knew of. So,
you know, and where did you grow up? Did you grow up in California, or did you grow up somewhere else?
Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, New York. You're an East Coaster too. I was
from cold country, dude. So yeah, just awesome. I'm drawn to like the tropics, you know, and then, you know, out here, warm weather, and I love the city. I love the people. I still have a lot of family and friends, but dude, it's just too cold, man.
Yeah.
Cold.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm like, I don't ever want to be cold again. I'm gonna come out here. Though the mornings out here have been really cold lately. I'm like, got to put on my jacket, get on my sweater.
They have, man. Like, you know, I talk to people that are around here, you know, and I'm all bundled up, and I'm like freezing, and man, it's 50 degrees in the morning, and they're like, what's wrong with this guy? You know, I'm like, dude, it's cold. I'm not afraid to say it's cold anymore. You know, I'm not afraid to put another sweatshirt on and a beanie and be vulnerable. So yeah.
Exactly. So you went into the infantry, right?
Yeah.
Start out. And so you were there for a few years, and you came in at this kind of, I guess you could say, kind of lucky time where MARSOC was just kind of forming up, right?
Yeah. I mean, I ended up coming in September 11th was actually while I was in boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I don't know, a month in, maybe somewhere in there. I don't know. So everyone else seems to remember exact dates and times, and I think it was about a month in, because I was there in August. So I want to say about a month in was, you know, September 11th, and I did about an enlistment with 3-8 on the East Coast, and then I went up to Quantico for a little while and was doing quite a bit of instructing and some curriculum development for a bunch of different courses that were up there. I'm doing some traveling and stuff for them, and then I, you know, hopped on a MARSOC, you know, after that.
And so when you first heard about it, how did you get the information? Were you, because I remember like at the time, like it was kind of like this thing, and it was like not everybody like knew much about it. It was brand new, like, you know.
I knew nothing until one day. So when I was in Quantico, I was at Small Arms Weapons Instructor course. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Small Arms Weapons Instructor School. So SOLIS, HRP, foreign weapons, sniper school, like I was in that section of Quantico. So I was teaching all those schools, not sniper school, but all the other ones, I ended up teaching and working for. And they just came down one day and they were like, okay, we want you, and you. This is what we're looking for. This is this new thing that is this, this new unit that's going to be formed. Who else wants to go? And, at the time, man, no one had a clue. So it was FNTU, I think it was called. So I forget the abbreviation, but I know it was FNTU, I think is what it was. And then FNTU ended up being third grader battalion. And I couldn't go though, because even though this new special unit was being formed, I didn't have 2 years on station yet. So, and they did everything they could to get every guy that was teaching at any of those specialized schools, because when FNTU, third grader battalion first stood up, that's a lot of stuff they were doing. It was like the training aspect of it, the FID missions. So that's kind of where they started to pull people from for that portion of it. But I couldn't go because I didn't have 2 years on station, so I had to wait. And then, they started doing selections. They were like, okay, well, then they started opening up the door to selections. And we had one guy go to selection before me, who's a good friend of mine. We had kids, our first babies at the same time. And then as soon as he came back, before he even came back, I had already had paperwork in, that was where I wanted to go. Because then there was an actual track of like, okay, we're not just coming down here to take people anymore. Here's an application process and a track. Now you need to go ahead and do some formal paperwork. And so I started the paperwork.
That's awesome. And so, it took them a bit to form up a schoolhouse and get everything together, right? They had to just gather resources. And I think I was listening to an interview. You were in the second class of the schoolhouse that they put together, right?
Yep. Yeah. So by the time that they started running some selections at first, which would have been like where Nick went through, and then a bunch of other guys, where I was, teams with, and I know, and they kind of ran selection for some of those guys to make sure it was a vetted process still. And then they opened up the doors, to other people. So I don't know where I fell in the selection process, as far as what number that would have been, but it was pretty early. And then, past selection, got selected. Just because you pass selection doesn't mean you get selected. Contrary beliefs to a lot of people. Pass selection, get selected, and then I went straight to the schoolhouse, and I, joined up with the second ITC class back in 2009. Wow.
So I got to ask you this, because there's a lot of guys out there who they're currently serving the infantry. And as you know, in an infantry unit, you're out in the field. You get a whole host of different characters in there. Lots of people smoke, lots of people drink, lots of people play video games, that kind of stuff. What was it like for you saying, okay, I've got this ambition, I want to go do that? How did you get around just being with the status quo and getting to the point to say, all right, I'm going to do this extra training. I'm not going to go play those video games. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that.
I think what started to segue me into that mindset or that process or that outlook on my career path at that point was I had left the infantry battalions for, at this point it had been a couple of years. So I was up in Quantico and I was teaching pretty high level schools. I mean, it was MOS producing schools, one of them, HRP was another one. Foreign weapons didn't even exist in the Marine Corps, I wrote the program for it. So my career had started to develop differently, where I was surrounding myself with people who were, higher achievers, higher intellect, higher responsibility, just by nature of who they were. Nothing to do with rank. It all had to do with the person themselves. They were, driven people, high achievers willing to work, not complainers, because we were all chosen to be in the places that we were at. So that's kind of like my career started to shift a little bit. And I didn't really realize it at the time because I was in it, just like anything else. And it's pretty funny. I talked to Nick about it, and I actually had orders came up, and I had orders back to a Victor unit. It was East Coast again, and dude, I went into like a panic mode. Like, no shit, man. I was like, oh man, I do not want to go back and babysit 18-year-old kids. I don't want to be responsible for some kid's actions. Now that kid was me at one point, right. And I wasn't a troublemaker. I didn't get, in trouble, but there was plenty of people did. I mean, you know how it is, right? So yeah. I didn't have to answer to any of that stuff because the people I was working with were responsible. They took care of themselves. They did well at their job. And I didn't feel like I was better than everybody else. I just had gotten to that point in my life where I wanted to be surrounded with people who were other high achievers, who cared about the career, cared about themselves, and wanted to further advance and continuously do better and be better. Dude, I sat down and I got an RE3 Oscar code, and because I denied orders, and wow, dude, this was before I even put in a package for selection, wow. I sat down with the recruiter, and I had a Chief Warrant Officer 5 who was a gunner in the Marine Corps at the time. He was the highest gunner in the Marine Corps. He's like, hey, you can't do this. And I said, well, listen, there's another option. There's another venue I want to do. I didn't know if I was ever even going to make it past the paperwork side of selection, right? Like I had no clue. I wasn't beating my chest thinking like I'm the greatest guy in the street. Of course they're going to take me. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I think I really maybe just didn't even understand the really ramifications that could have happened. And so I signed papers for an RE3 Oscar code, and some little Lance Corporal at the time looked at me. He's like, hey, you just need to understand, you'll never pick up rank again. You'll never have a choice at a duty station ever again. And whatever comes up, you're going to have to take, or there's going to be further on legal action. And I said, all right, cool story, man. And I just signed the paperwork. And wow. Yeah. Looking back, I don't know what the hell I was thinking, honestly. Like, I really don't. But there was just something in me that said, my path is going to change. It could have not, very easily not, so then, and then I was like, I want to go to selection. And I started the paperwork, and the same kid in the office was like, you can't turn this in. And I said, well, I want to, like, this is where I want to go, and this is what I want to do. And dude, I don't know how or what had happened. I don't know what aligned. I don't know who was looking at. I have no clue. Paperwork went through, and I had to sit in front of the board, with the recruiters. And at the time, like whoever was in charge, of the selection process at the time, who was receiving paperwork, and I just talked to them, and they said, all right, fuck, we'll give you a shot, but here's the deal: you don't pass physically, mentally, emotionally, everything selection's looking for, and we don't take you on the backside of this. You're at the mercy of your fate that you had signed. That
you're at the mercy of the big green weenie.
Yeah, man. And I just said, okay, cool story. Like, when am I going? When am I going to selection? And I started to figure out, like, when was I going? How was I going to go? Dude, and this is back when, like, there was no knowledge, there was no understanding, there was no website for selection where you could look up criteria.
The other aspect to this, I want to, because I remember at the time, the Marine Corps was kind of openly hostile to a unit, a special unit. Like, they had Recon, but yeah, they were kind of openly hostile to the idea of creating like a special unit of Marines. And just thinking about that, that's like, for you to do that and to have the courage to say, hey, I'm going to go with this, that took a lot, because I've been at the mercy of the big green weenie before. A lot of us have. And that's fear right there, because they can make your life miserable.
I had just had my first daughter too, so I don't know. So that's, and then I said, okay, now that I've made this decision, and I need to figure out, what is the criteria, because like I said, there was no website to go to. There wasn't, years of population of people that had been through the pipeline that you could, maybe ask a question to or something like that. The only thing that existed was there was sheets of paper, literally like old emails of sheets of paper. I think it was 10 pages long or something like that. It was SFAS. You ever hear that?
No.
So it was Special Forces Assessment Selection. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know, who was the program designer behind it, but it was like the thing that, dudes were being passed around. Guys would use it before they went to sniper school. They would kind of run through the program,
and the internet wasn't like what it is today. Like there was no YouTube or anything like that, right?
No, man. And if there was, I didn't know what the hell it was. You know what I mean? So I had, our schoolhouse was right next to the sniper schoolhouse. And I had some really good guys that were friends of mine that were at the sniper schoolhouse. And, and we would like, obviously share information and things like that. There's nothing to hide. We would help each other out for curriculum things. And I went to them and I said, hey, can I get your land nav points? Because I need to start running, I need to start refreshing my stuff, right? Like you need to knock yourself down a peg and relearn the basics and then make sure that you can, properly, perform the basics and master the basics like anybody else, what they should be doing. And I would do PT, like CrossFit in the morning, because that's when CrossFit was like huge and booming, and we had a couple officers over there that they bought into the CrossFit, game. I mean, everything under the sun. And, but it was good because I did those, in the morning. And then my schedule was flexible enough because I was an instructor there. So, we either had a class on deck or we didn't. And depending on that, I would do, I don't know, man, 4 or 5 rucks, 6 rucks a week, maybe something like that. And, full uniform and 35 pounds, 45 pounds in the back. And I just started with a notepad and paper. And I just started assessing myself, to see where I was at. Because I didn't know what the standard was. No one knew what the standard was. You just knew that you had to push yourselves as much as humanly possible to what you could do, not to what, a paperwork or a website told you had to do. Because you didn't know. You just had to put in the work. So that's what I did. And yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, but one thing I just want to come back to real quick, because we mentioned like regular infantry and stuff like that. And one thing I want to say is this: like, there's nothing wrong with being regular infantry. What my point was at that, like, I think every Marine has a choice. And that is to do your job, to be good at it, or to go to the smoke pit and complain about life and talk about how much it sucks. Yeah. And I think too many guys take that latter choice and then they complain so much that it becomes a way of life. And if you do that, Marine Corps is not going to give you any opportunity. It's not just going to come around and say, hey, let's make your life easier, right? You actively have to seek out opportunities to improve. And so for you young guys out there who might still be in, think about that choice. Think about that choice of whether you're going to go out there, take the initiative to improve yourself, because Josh, he went out, he figured this stuff out for himself. And a lot of that stuff is stuff you got to do. You just can't wait for those opportunities to hit you in the face.
Yeah, man, it's unknown and it's scary. Like to say that I was not, scared or concerned at many of days is an understatement, because I didn't know what the fate it was going to be, right? And just like you said it, is that you got to go out and, there's a point in time in your career where you got to start looking out for number one, right? Like, and it's not a selfish thing. So I think for a long time, and what people get, kind of stuck into, so can you still hear me?
What was that? Yeah, I can still hear you, brother.
what people get stuck into is that if you look out for yourself to better your career or better yourself or further educate yourself or diversify yourself from your singletory MOS, that you're being selfish and that you're not being the troop leader that you should, and that you're not being, the right squad leader and the right this and the right lad because you're being selfish. Well, you know what, man? Like, sometimes being selfish is what it takes. You got to better yourself a little bit to become the best human being you can, to be the best in your MOS that you can, diversify yourself. Then you got that much more knowledge to spread. You have that much more stuff to pass down to these young kids who are coming up through the ranks just, where you used to be, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So.
Right. And you did a full enlistment before doing this too, right? Like,
yeah, enlistment and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's just thinking about that because, I just haven't been in, I know what the Marine Corps is like when you're trying to advance yourself and you have a different program than what they've laid out for you. And man, I admire you for that. That's insane.
It's, and it doesn't always have to be. And I'll circle it back to what you're saying. You're right. There's nothing wrong with continuing a 20-year career in the infantry. And I have plenty really, really close friends of mine that are still in that, are master sergeants now, like gunnies now, about to be master sergeant pinned on, that they've been, a 69, in that field for 17 years or so now. And those are some of the most intelligent guys that I know. And it doesn't always have to be that you're striving to go recon or go MARSOC or go to sniper school. Find a school, either within your MOS or close enough to your MOS, or something that can, diversify you to be a benefit, to be a force multiplier, like be the biggest force multiplier that you can be to one, yourself, to, your platoon, your team, your squad, and to your company, to whatever kind of group organization you have, depending on what your MOS is, just continuously always try and push yourself to learn, to grow, and to be better. So
let me ask you this, because, how did they source the cadre for the school? How did they source the instructors?
For selection or for ITC?
For ITC.
For ITC was it would have been a lot of recon guys at the time. Mm-hmm. So maybe it was, guys that had been in teams, for quite a while that were building up some of the cadre. And then depending on what we were doing, right? So obviously, it's a 10-month school. So there's a lot of iteration. There's a lot of things in courses that are covered topics, right? But depending on what section we were in and what school phase we were going through, it was a mixed bag between contractors, so guys that were, former, 18 series guys, that maybe had got out and they caught a contract with, some company and they were teaching. And then it was always coupled with team guys and, guys who were just coming off the deployment and they were kind of hot filling on the backside for the Schoolhouse. So that's who comprised our cadre. It was former team guys, current team guys, we're just on like a delayed from the rotation, or some contractors that were, more than likely coming off of an X-ray program, not an X-ray, 18 series program, who were, out now.
Nice. And when you were going through school, so obviously you said you were self-assessing, you trained a lot. When you got there, did you feel like you were prepared?
During the course, or?
Yeah.
For sure. I wasn't in charge of you're always in charge of your own physical state of readiness, right? But there was a curriculum and a pipeline that I was going through. So what I had to learn, and what I think a lot of guys have to understand, which is what I had to do, is that you have to build yourself for that specific event or that specific program or that, that course that you're going through. And And that's what that course was doing, is they were continuously building and growing and developing us into being what it is that they wanted us to be. So the more that you resisted that, so I knew some guys that, we all have anomalies, right? The guys that can go and run, 12, 15 miles and act like nothing happened when they're done with it, and then they can continue on for the rest of the day, right? So take that 10% out of the equation. But there were some guys who, they would go to the gym, after a 14-hour day, during this course, and they would go do like bodybuilder type workouts, like do, Monday's chest day and back and buys and chest and tries and, do squats on Wednesdays. And I'm not against you trying to, further strengthen yourself or condition yourself or prepare yourself, but there's also a process. And, if you develop yourself, you can develop yourself out of a state of readiness, for that process. And there were some guys that actually did that, and I think that's a really key thing that a lot of people need to understand, is that, before you go to maybe selection, you have to train and equip and prepare yourself to successfully complete and pass selection. And then once that is done, you have to prepare yourself for the next phase or the next evolution. And that's, for me at that point in time, it was ITC. And then when that is done, you're now on the teams, and you need to figure out, what is it you need to do to properly prepare yourself? Because it's all different, I mean, it's like guys when they go to buds, like if you don't train like that once you're on the teams. You don't prepare yourself like that once you're on the teams. It's a process, and it's a thing you're going through. It's an evolution. So prepare yourself for that. And then when you're done with that, whatever your next thing is, you're going to have to shift a little bit and prepare yourself differently and learn how to flush that out of your brain, and prepare for that, to be the best one you can be.
It's interesting how the concept of physical training has changed, because, back in the 90s, it was like long endurance runs, learn how to do well on the PFT, working some humps, and then bodybuilding stuff, right? Like go do some curls and shit like that. And, it's funny because there was like this revolution that I think occurred like maybe like 2004, 2005, CrossFit and stuff. People were doing more functional stuff. And today you see it all over the place. But back then it was like, hey, go run as long as you can, then do some pull-ups, do some push-ups, and then hit the gym and, wear some bright colored spandex and stuff like that.
Like take anybody else that you require such a high, percentage of output at any given thing. Like, that's not how they train. That's not how they work. But I just think it was just a lack of knowledge, and not that there wasn't a lack of knowledge out here in the vast verse of, strength and conditioning. It was just, I think the military lived in a bubble, and they thought that they were just so special and different that they didn't have to train and equip themselves in accordance like every other, athlete, train and equips themselves, that they were, some sort of weird anomaly. And I'm thankful now that, the tides have turned and guys are training and preparing themselves a lot differently,
How big of a factor is overtraining when it comes to prepping for something like this, or when people get out into the teams?
Huge. I believe it's absolutely huge. There's the adage of like, train till you puke, if, 110%, one more rep and leave everything in the gym. Well, I mean, that's good and all, but is that setting yourself up for success for the next training evolution or that next day? And that's kind of what I was talking about by those guys, some guys that would go, to the gym afterwards. It's not that I'm against people continuously trying to better themselves. It's know that there's a point in time where the body is taxed, and you might not maybe feel it or recognize it, but internally, I mean, you're knowledgeable, human being on this kind of stuff too, there's a lot of things that are going on internally that maybe those alarms just aren't going off in your head, to give you that sign to stop. And the Marine Corps or the military in general, or law enforcement, is really good at pushing human beings past the point of optimization, right? Like somebody told me at one point is that, what is it? Perseverance does not equal optimization or something like that. Human resiliency does not equal optimization. That just because you can do it and just because you can push yourself that much farther doesn't mean it's optimal. One, for your health, two, for recovery or the next day, or, follow on training, because, so I think it's huge.
Yeah, that, and I'm good friends with Andrew Marr, Green Beret, who's worked with the Warriors Angels Foundation, and I've also spoken quite a bit to Dr. Kirk Parsley, who I know Nick also had on the show. And when you think about some of the things that guys are going through these days, with traumatic brain injury and brain inflammation, a lot of the conditions for having a really bad traumatic brain injury actually start with the amount of inflammation that's already in your body. And so if you're just tearing things down constantly, and then you go out and you're handling explosives, or you're in proximity to explosions, or even if you're manning a 50 cal and getting jerked back, that can shut down a lot of the hormonal cascades that are in your brain. You combine that with lack of sleep, lack of rest, lack of recovery. It's a recipe for having a really messed up decade when you're in your 30s and 40s.
Some of those are by nature of the job or the duty, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have a field op and you have, an all day, hump, and then you're setting up, you're setting up camp, and then, you're preparing the guns, and then you have a night shoot, and then you have, when the shoot is done, we all know, there's cleanup, there's procedures and stuff that happen. So you're right. I talked to a lot of guys, and they're like, well, I'm going to the field for 3 weeks, and I'm not going to get sleep, and I'm going to be eating MREs and this and that. And I was like, I got it. Those are uncontrolled variables, like, so take this knowledge and take the understanding, like things you just said, and try and sneak in things here or there, hydrate yourself even more. Right. Or, if you can bring, some vitamins or something like that can just kind of put some good healthy stuff into you. Or if you can bring, some supplementation of, whatever it is that you need, for your body, food wise or, chemical wise, do that, right? Like some of those variables are things you can't control, but take that knowledge, that when you're back from the field, and say, hey, maybe I'm pretty taxed more than I think I am. Maybe because I just got back Friday morning, like hitting the bars until 4, 5, 6 a.m. Maybe not optimal for me. I mean, it might be fun. I'm not denying that. I was that age at one point. I was that guy. But, hindsight and learning, maybe take a little bit of time to take some sleep and put some vitamins and good nutrients and food back in your body. Because, we all know, when you sign a contract, and I try and tell guys, it's like, it's a commitment for a long duration, and if you keep looking at it on the short end of, we all have these attainable goals. We're like, I got this many more days until I'm out of the field, or this many more days until I'm done with deployment. But how many more days until, until you're dead or until your enlistment's up? Like, you have to look long range for your health.
Right.
And that's where I think, people lack sometimes, is looking into the future for their health. What's better 10, 20, 30 years down the road? What's optimal,
Yeah. And that's the thing, because I think you and I are about the same age. In when you're 23, 22, 19, you feel like you're invincible, right? And you really are, compared to someone like me, who, if I catch a cold, I'm on the floor, like quivering and twitching and shit like that. So like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, that time when you're 23, 22 and you go out, you hit the bars, great, awesome, you're having fun, but there's going to be a cost to pay at some point. Yeah. And that cost might not come in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But when you turn 35, 40 years old, that cost is going to be there. You're going to feel it. And it comes, we've got, I don't want to beat that horse, but the suicide rate that happens when guys get out, the state of health. 1 in 4 veterans admitted to the VA system. 25% of us have full-blown diabetes when we get admitted, and that's of all ages. 25%. So it's like this stuff that you do when you're young, there's a cost there.
There is, and it'll hit you like a ton of bricks. Like you were just saying, things creep up at me now, and I'm like, I always try and play it off like, well, maybe it's just this, maybe it's just that, and I realize like, no, man, it's because there's been traumatic events, there's been this, there's been that, and I don't try and use it as an excuse anymore. I try and use it as like a platform of knowledge and understanding of how I can understand that, and what do I need to do. What's my roadmap to success? What's my roadmap to my best human optimization as possible, so I can limit some of these factors. So
yeah. It's like having a bank account. You can only make so many withdrawals, man.
I've made plenty. Do not get me wrong. Like, all the guys listen like, don't act like you weren't young. Trust me, I was the guy that was at the bar, 5-6 times a week when I was 18, 19 years old, 20, I lived it. I got it. So, I mean, I understand it. Yeah. But
so you and Nick have developed these prep courses and these prep books for MARSOC, for Marine Corps boot camp prep, for these things. And when you were starting to put these together, were you thinking in your head, okay, these are the things that I would have done had I known a little bit more, or these are the mistakes I made and I don't want other guys to make these things?
All the above.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was, a lot of it was just, I care about human beings, right? That's where I lie, right? That's where my loyalty is I really just genuinely care about human beings. And whether or not it's an 18-year-old kid about to go into the military, or whether it's a 20-something-year-old, guy that's, wants to go recon and wants to go MARSOC or is at a different place in his life, right? Like I care that, they're doing something that's going to benefit them and set them up properly and for success. And that's what these programs are, is that, like I was saying, when I did mine and Nick did his, and probably when you went to boot camp too, like there was no prep. It's like you said, you run, you do this, you do that, but it's very few things. And, we sat down and dived into a lot of stuff, where the shortfalls were. And then also, where is, what are the requirements for that stage, whether it be, going into boot camp, going into recon, going into MARSOC, what are the requirements that are going to be, charged upon that person? What are they going to have to do physically? And obviously we know some back channel information, because we've been through some of these programs, or all of them actually. Collectively, we've been through every single one. But, we don't divulge back channel stuff, but we don't divulge things that are behind the curtain, not because it's secret squirrel. Some stuff is designed for you to kind of find out, on the fly. So we built it to the requirements that are publicly posted. That way there's no, confusion or concern about, giving away information that's not publicly known. So we found the end state of what someone's going to be required to do, and we just reverse engineered it. In order to develop that person as best as humanly possible. Now, obviously, how training is, you're telling me about, your Metroflex gym and things like that, and all the stuff you've done and you're currently doing. The throughput and the input is on the individual.
Right.
The program's been laid. The science is there, the numbers are there, the criteria, the program has been developed. Now it's on that individual to perform it and to do it. We've had really good success, like really, really good success.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And, what you say there about the throughput being through the individual, because I do my own training. I do a very different modality, I guess you'd say, as far as the types of people I train, but it's always on the individual to be able to do it. And the thing about this situation is you got to remember what you're trying to become, right? And that's the thing. it's you gotta fit that mold that they're trying to create for you, just like you said before.
Yeah. You got to train to those specifications. You know, it's not you creating a program anymore. The requirements have already been developed, and there is a program and a pipeline, whether it be 12 or 13 weeks, you know, boot camp, or whether it be, you know, BRC or ANS or ITC, like that course is developed, and it's not going to deviate. It's not going to change, you know, more than likely throughout the entire time that you're there. So you know the requirements, you know, the secret's out of the bag. Like you know what you're going to be required to do, physically at least. So at least put that in your favor, you know. And I think a lot of other factors of a human being develop when they push themselves, you know, to those physical requirements. You know, they understand what it is they're capable of. They understand what they're not capable of. They understand how to push themselves. You know, they understand, you know, how their body develops, how they recover, like you were talking about. You know, when they do intensive type workouts, when they're doing 2-a-days, how do they feel the next day? You know, are they ready for it? You know, because our biggest thing is I tell guys, you know, they come and they're like, well, you know, what are we at right now? Today's January. Let's just say, you know, guys like, I'm leaving in April and I have to do this program because, you know, I want to go in April. What if you're not ready by April? You know, what if you go through the program and, you know, you run your own PT test, you run your own standards test? What if you're not ready? Are you still going to go? I mean, why would you set yourself up, you know, for almost failure, you know? So do these programs and prep yourself as far out as humanly possible. You know, if you're a 16-year-old kid and you think you're going to go in the military, well, I tell you what, like the USMC Prep one, it's not going to fail you, you know, from doing your sports. But find out where you sit and set yourself up for success.
That's the definite truth there. And I can't speak to MARSOC at all, but I can tell you guys, you 16-year-olds who are thinking about going to Marine Corps boot camp, in addition to all the physical stuff, prep yourself mentally. Don't get married at 17 before you go. Try not to have a girlfriend. And yeah, I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you're right. And, you know, and guys will say, you know, like, and this is the unfortunate part sometimes is, you know, the big guys that, you know, maybe have been in for like 2 or 3 years, and they're like, why would these guys go to a program to go to boot camp? You know, all you have to do is 3 pull-ups and a 28-mile run, 3-mile run, and this and this. And I'm like, so you're telling me that, you know, you've been in the Marine Corps now for a couple years, and you're telling kids about to come in who potentially might be in your platoon, your battalion, you know, your team, that don't worry about it, just meet the bare minimum. I mean, come on, man. Is that really the guy physically, mentally, emotionally that you want behind you? Hell no. I want the guy who's like snuffing and sniffing and trying to just be as best as he can, because, you know, my nephew he ended up going in the Coast Guard, you know, but what I told him is I said, hey man, the first couple of years in the military really sets you up. You know, if you can go in, being the highest guy on the PT level, being the highest guy in this, highest guy in that, you know, think about if you came out of boot camp, you know, at, I don't know, E3 or E2, you know, I mean, you're 3 months, 6 months ahead of these guys now on a rank structure. And you've developed your mind to not meet the bare minimum. You've developed your mind already that you want to be the guy who perseveres and is a high achiever. And you're setting yourself up, you know, for at least a 4-year career that you can't get out of. So, you know, if you had a job, if you were going to get a job at, you know, I don't know, some regular job here, and they were like, hey, you're going to work with us no matter what, you know, for 4 years. And your success is depending on how well you do. I mean, you're probably going to put forth everything you can.
Absolutely.
to be good at it, you know, to rise up. So.
Well, that's how. And how can people grab these programs? Where can they go?
I mean, you can find them on Amazon. I mean, they're on Kindle, you know, Kindle version, PDF version. There's hard copies you can buy. Nick's website, nickkumalatos.com. Figure out how to spell that Greek name. We can post it, but it's at his website. I always make fun of him. But So
Little secret there. If you go alexanderindustries.com, that pops it up if you can't spell Cumulatos.
Yeah. USMCprep.com, radarprep.com, reconprep.com. It all ends up funneling into, one site. Google it.
Awesome. We'll get links to that up on the show notes.
Yeah.
Well, man, number one, thank you for coming on and thank you for talking about that experience. I mean, we didn't cover your career at all, and we're going to have you come on and maybe talk about some of that stuff later on and talk about the transitions and getting out. But this is like, I mean, if I was an 18-year-old kid or just a 22-year-old Marine thinking about doing selection, there would be so much here to go off of. And I highly suggest you guys out there, it's about personal development, about making yourself into the best person you could be, the best Marine you could be, the best whatever you're going to be, right? No matter what it is. And so, these are resources that didn't exist back, as little as 10, 15 years ago that everybody can take advantage of who wants to go down that path. So freaking take advantage of them, guys. Take advantage of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's my biggest thing now is just developing yourself into being the best human being you can be, to be the best person you can be. And then it's multifaceted like everything else in life. Right? I mean, and my segue into the strength conditioning and training is an interesting story. We'll have to cover that maybe in the next one if we're out of time here. But
dude, we're gonna have to have you back on. We're gonna have to have you back on to talk about that, because I think that definitely want to hear about that. And being a trainer myself, that's always an interesting story. And definitely want to talk about your life getting out and how that was. So
open book, anytime.
Awesome. And with that, guys, I want to thank you guys so much for listening. Like I said, get your hands on these resources. And, the biggest thing, life, right? Life is hard. It's difficult sometimes, but it's worth living. Sometimes the part about living it means that you're not just comfortable, you're seeking a little bit of struggle there. And, if you guys can go out there and put a little more effort in, force yourselves to grow, then you are going to get the most you can out of life, just like Josh did over his time. So thank you guys again. We'll be back at you next week with some more awesome content. And this is Chris and Josh, and we are out.